Hi gang, Rob here. It is the morning of 24 October 2018, coming to you with a knife review, not of this knife, but of this pattern. This is the first Great Eastern cutlery knife I ever purchased. Back in the day, I don't know, about 2013, 2014, before GEC went nuclear, I found this standard jack languishing in the inventory of Knife Ship Free. I don't know, it had been there for maybe 6 months. Yeah. And I bought it. Check it out. This is the number 78 American Jack. I'm trying to get a model number for you guys. Here we go. Model 781214. So early 2014 production. This is my first Great Eastern cutlery knife. Sort of my favorite pattern. A medium large sized standard jack. Slight sleeve board shape. Thinner at the pivot end. A little larger at the butt end for good grip in the back of your hand. Lined and pinched nickel silver bolsters. At the time, what was one of the best looking jig bone patterns GEC had ever made. Cranberry jig bone is the color. Northfield unexcelled trim. You can see this knife is kind of well used. The Northfield etch barely visible. The polished blade kind of scratched up with use over the years. Not the best looking clip point that GEC has ever made, but looks pretty good with the cut swedge and the long pull. It's a little straight for too long, I think, and not quite enough belly. A little too much drop in the clip for my personal taste, but still a really, really functional, hard use jackknife. Yeah, I said it. Hard use jackknife. Closed length is exactly 3 3/4 inches. Length of the main blade 2 13/16. So not super efficient blade to handle ratio for a slip joint. That means the pivot is buried pretty deeply in the handle to give it lots of lateral stability. Super strong knife. And then you have a mark side pen. And check out this pen, guys. A full 2 5/16 inches of pen blade. Very, very usable jackknife. What's the claim to fame or the claim to infamy of these original 78 pattern knives? Well, it is this 8 pull. I mean, it is a strong 8. It is a gator snapping man's pocket knife. Lots of guys loved the 78 for that, myself included. Lots of guys, you know, with girly fingernails thought, oh, they're too hard. Well, you know, there's a technique. Notice on the mark side pen, the proximity of the spine of the pen blade to the pull of the main blade. You sort of get the thumbnail in there and pry against the pen blade to get it started. Then you can pinch it out. It's a really usable knife. Pen blade nestles nicely. Doesn't really affect the grip in any negative way. Just an iconic GEC pattern. I love this one so much. And frankly, one of my best buddies, my cousin Vinny, the attorney from Maryland, Steve Conti, he tries to buy this knife for me every time he sees it. Ain't gonna happen. Okay, because guess what? They don't languish anymore. Very sought after pattern. Now, a year and 2 months ago, when I was in Titusville, Pennsylvania for the GEC rendezvous, I saw this in the case of store-only knives. An ebony wood Titty version of that same knife. I think the clip point actually looks a little better in proportion. in TheApostleP trim than it does Northfield. Just a nail nick, a very discreet drawn swedge. Same gator snap. Same big old pen blade. Gotta love it. I love this knife. One of my favorite GEC patterns. It's sort of my wheelhouse pocket knife in traditional slip joints. 3 3/4 standard jack. Love it. So, 2018 rolls around, 2017 I guess. GEC does another run of 78s. And you guys know I'm a clip point guy, but here's the tube for the 2017 TheApostleP 78 that I have. Nothing special going on there. Some more color on the label, no back label. And the knife is number 7822217 in smooth white bone. Now if there are two covers I like in a user slip joint, ebony wood or Gabon ebony, and smooth white bone are my favorites. They don't get dirty, they slip in and out of the pocket nicely, easy to maintain, and this is the 2017 version. I waited a long time to buy this actually. Just bought it about 2 months ago. Bought it used. Paid too much. Not too darn much. Not a bad deal actually. So what's the difference between this knife and this knife? Did you catch it by the model number? Yeah, look. Spear main. And I'm not a huge spear point fan, but you know, I just had to have one of the latest iteration of the 78 and wanted it to be a user. It's a pretty good spear. It doesn't get too fat at its widest point. Still got an acute tip. Not quite a Zulu spear, but not an 85 spear either. Just a very, very useful blade shape. Normal TheApostleP trim, nail nick, drawn swedge, satin finish. Same big old pen blade. Love it. This has, of course, smooth nickel silver bolsters, hot dog shield, and then that smooth white bone. I just love it. It yellows a little bit with age and it just never wears out. How do we do on construction? Well, I will say this. We have just a little bit of raised nickel silver on one of the 8 corners. Don't know if you can see it, but this bone gets just a little raggy at a couple of the corners right here. And where's that? Yeah, I guess this is the corner that is a little raggy. The bone went away a little quicker than the bolster, than the end cap did during polishing. Not a big deal. Absolutely beautiful hafting. Let's come in a little closer. Just beautiful hafting on this knife. No gaps, no light penetration through the blade well. Everything is just so buttoned up. I do have one complaint though. One complaint. What made this knife an icon in the GEC lineup, its 8 pull, at least 8, maybe 8.5, is kind of gone with this knife. I think Bill and Randy, that's Bill Howard, owner of GEC, and Randy Bell, the engineer, I think they capitulated. We don't have an 8. We don't even have a 7. We got about a 6.5 pull on that main blade. Makes it about like a 77. Okay, 77 is about the same size, a little less taper in the handle, and it is a pile side pen, so the pen blade would be on this side of the main. Which, you know, you kind of need, you can do that because you don't need that spine to pry against when opening the main blade on a 77. 78, though, you know, what really gave it its character, the American Jack 78 versus the Yankee Jack, the 77, what gave it its character, what set it apart, I think, were two things. The really large pen blade and the hard pull, the big snap on the main blade. I think you can even hear that. Listen. So there's the 17 model. Yeah, I think that's a lot different. It sure feels a lot different. Do I like this knife, though? You bet I do. Let's face it, once it's open and in your hand, still handles like a 78, which is to say, awesome. It's just a little different. Part of the story, right? Just part of the story of GEC. And it's great, I think, that GEC has now been around long enough that we're starting to see patterns reappear in production and evolve a little bit. It's really cool. You know, what makes this knife different than these two are not only the blade shape, but a couple subtle little differences, things that GEC decided to change as the years went by based on how the original version was received. Not a bad thing. I just kind of prefer the older ones. Of course, they have clip point blades to the newer one. Just thought you'd like to see this knife and understand, if you don't own one yet, what makes this a little different from 78s of years past. And absolutely still one of my go-to EDC traditional slip joints. Do I go to this as often as I go to this? No. But I still go to it. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. That's all for this one, my friends. Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. And remember, the Word and my Spear Point 78 are sharp.